Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to your favorite weekly horoscope, this time for November 15th through the 21st of 2021. My name is Cam White. Thank you guys so much for being here. I've got a ton to do today, and I'm already kind of behind because I was like, oh, there's not a lot going on this week. This will be an easy horoscope. And then I looked back at the thing. I was like, oh my God, I forgot there's actually so much going on this week. And then plus, my thingamajig on my iPad's not working, so this is now connected to my phone. So hopefully I don't get any funny text messages. Well, anyway, yeah, and so it's gonna bounce and look like this. But anyway, November 15th through the 21st. I thought this wasn't gonna be a big week. I mean, realistically, it's not last week, and last week might have been much more of like aggravating, maybe stressful, maybe feeling like you're hitting a wall, maybe even a lot of you got really exhausted and tired. Versus this week, like I've been kind of saying over the past few weeks, we're kind of wrapping up the summer and a lot of the seeds are starting to get planted for what this winter has in store and what the next couple months have in store. That's what a lot of this week is. But how we start the week off on Monday is just with the sun squaring Jupiter. Not really the biggest thing as we kind of start Monday here. Let me actually get to this. I'm like, hold on. I'm not used to the buttons I have to click now that I'm using like my phone. Anyway, this is right now. Let's actually get to Monday. On Monday, sun's going to be squaring Jupiter. I mean, realistically, like the moon's going to be in Aries, kind of just hanging out. It's not really going to be doing much. It squares Venus super late into Sunday night, into Monday morning. Not really even into Monday morning, but the moon's kind of in Aries. Maybe we're feeling a little bit like emotionally charged up, but it's not really aspecting anything. So I'm not too worried about the moon being in Aries on Monday, but the sun's in Scorpio, squaring Jupiter in Aquarius. That sun does really represent our ego. As much as, and I think the idea of ego gets really thrown, the word ego gets thrown around a lot these days, but I would really just say with the sun's in Scorpio, we could be a little bit like maybe really fixated and attached to our perception, our identity, the way that we see things, the way that we want things to be. And it's going to be squaring Jupiter in Aquarius. There's this sense of not being able to blend things in together, right? Sun in Scorpio squaring Jupiter in Aquarius is almost like kind of like going out of your way to be inconvenient. And this isn't necessarily like, this isn't like a Mars square Saturn, right? Where that's like gridlock, kind of like, really pushing back. Sun in Scorpio squaring Jupiter in Aquarius is like, well, it doesn't make the job easier. I think that it makes the job a little bit more difficult. Jupiter's job is to have faith. Jupiter's job is to integrate in Aquarius. In Aquarius, it's like, hey, how do we see both sides? How do we, bring the spirit of the law into the matter? And I think the sun in Scorpio is kind of like, there's this sense of kind of like, again, like it's almost cynical, I think is a good way to look at Monday, maybe being a little bit cynical. That's really the only thing that I really kind of see happening on Monday. As we get to Tuesday, there we go. The only thing we've got going on Tuesday is the moon making a sextile to Jupiter as it's still transiting Aries before it goes into Taurus. Really, again, not a whole lot going on Tuesday. I think the biggest thing on Tuesday is, the moon's going to be making a sextile to Jupiter, where there's this maybe feeling like it's a little bit easier to, I don't want to say just negotiate, but like integrate. Moon's in Aries, where we're wanting to address things very bluntly, maybe be emotionally confrontational. We will be a little bit more emotionally charged up. And I think as the moon sextiles Jupiter, maybe this is trying to get our point across a little bit more. Tuesday just seems, well, how I said last week, how it was like, well, Monday and Tuesday weren't really a big thing. It was like the moon was void, and then it was like Mars. Once we got to Wednesday and Mars squared Saturn, that's when the big thing would hit. That's kind of like this week, because like, well, Tuesday, it's like, well, the moon's going to sextile Jupiter. Like who cares? It's going to go into Taurus later on actually, what time does it go into Taurus? Let's actually see. Cause I wrote, it doesn't even go into Taurus till like after sunset. So we don't even get the moon in Taurus going. We don't even get that really until late Tuesday night. I just think as the moon's in Aries sextiling Jupiter, there might be a little bit more hope. There might be a little bit more optimism, a little bit more like bravado. Like the moon's in Aries, right? We're kind of like, hey, I want to do this. Hey, I want to do that. Hey, I'm, emotionally investing yourself into like your actions, and it's sextiling Jupiter. So there's a little bit of a push for energy, but it's not really the biggest deal. I think as we go back to Wednesday though, check out Wednesday. The moon will ingress into Taurus, right? It will make a trine to Venus in Capricorn while it conjoins Uranus, the moon will then go opposite Mars at the same time that Venus enters shadow and that Mars goes opposite Uranus. So, it's kind of like, I love astrology because sometimes it literally is sometimes like a movie where you'll be like watching the movie. Have you ever watched a movie, 20 minutes into it, you're like, what the fuck's going on? Why am I watching this? Like, there's nothing happening. And then it's like, all of a sudden something happens and it gets exciting. That's kind of like Wednesday. Not to say that life is not exciting right now in any way, that life is boring, but a lot of things kind of simultaneously happen on Wednesday. And it's super funny too that, the Venus entering shadow happens at the Mars-Uranus opposition, right? Like that really does set the context of like what Venus in shadow could bring up. Or I should say the Venus in retrograde could bring up. So the first thing that we have is the moon going into Taurus pretty much throughout the whole day, throughout the morning. It's going to be making that trine to Venus. Personally, I really like that. The moon's it's exalted in Taurus. It's going to be trining Venus in Capricorn. I like that without the context of everything else that's going on, right? I'm like, okay, that sounds good. Without knowing what other planets are doing anything else. And maybe the moon in Taurus is the moon in Taurus is like, hey, emotionally, my feelings, like I need to be grounded. I need to be stable. I need to be sturdy. And I think the moon in Taurus is looking to like nourish itself. It's looking to like, okay, where do I take care of my needs? Where can I kind of plant myself to kind of, get that going along even more? I think as the moon trines Venus in Capricorn, right? Venus is fun, indulgence, value. She's in Capricorn, a plan, a system, a routine, a structure, a set of rules, a tradition even. And I think as the moon trines Venus, there is this sense of like, hey, I'm feeling comfortable. I like this plan. I like this set of rules that I'm abiding by. I don't even say just like, it's working though. You may not even like it, but it's working, or there is this sense of trying to apply the work. In the sense of, well, this is something too. I didn't even write this down now that I'm kind of looking at it. The moon also squares Saturn and then trines Venus. So like, I think the moon squaring Saturn is kind of like, no one's really willing to budge when it comes to certain things. Like the moon's in Taurus, like, hey, I need to do things that are comfortable for me. And that's it. I think Saturn in Aquarius is like, hey, I want you to do things in a certain way. I want you to apply things in a certain way, my way or the highway, right? And I think the moon in Taurus is like, well, I'm not comfortable doing that, so I'm going to do what I'm going to do. And that's Venus in Capricorn, right? Like I'm going to get the job done, but in a fun way, in a way that's comfortable for me. So I think as we get to Wednesday, that moon squares Saturn, but it also trines Venus, is like, just because someone wants their, like, do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? Is a good way to look at it. Do you want things to work out in the way that you have your expectations set on, or are you open to how things, go about as long as you get the result that you're looking for? I think that's what Wednesday's about. Like, not necessarily like the moon in Taurus squaring Saturn in Aquarius is like, hey, look, if no one wants to budge, it's like, where can we? Saturn in Aquarius is also a stubborn sign. Saturn in Aquarius is also a controller, right? The fixed signs are control freaks: Leo, Taurus, Aquarius, Scorpio. And they're like, if you're one of those signs and you don't say that you don't like control, you're lying. It's a control thing. Saturn in Aquarius, though, is kind of like, hey, even though it does have a lot of authority, it has a lot of say so, doesn't necessarily mean it's right all the time. And I think that moon in Taurus is like, hey, my comfort might even be more important than, how everything's supposed to go. And I think as that moon shines, well, it's one of those things, like, for example, what came to my mind when I was kind of thinking about this was like, grocery store clerks, like here in America, because we hate labor for whatever, and workers for whatever reason, we make grocery clerks stand up the whole time. Don't know why, but it's a job that they just could sit down and totally perfectly handle their job fine. But we think that's like, not working hard enough. But in other countries, if you're a grocery store clerk, like they give you a chair because makes sense, right? It's like, well, I always think it's like, well, they don't make office workers stand up all day long. Why do office workers get a chair? They're doing the same thing. Anyway, this is one of those things of like, if you like Saturn Aquarius, like, well, if you're not standing up, you're not working hard enough. And it's like the moon in Taurus, it's kind of like, if that's bullshit. Like, you don't have to. Standing up means nothing. Like, well, it's one of those things of working smarter or working harder. And I think if you want to work hard, that is totally here for you Wednesday. But my advice is work smarter and work more with a sense of ease, right? That moon shining Venus in Capricorn is like, what system can you apply that can still get the job done, but it's going to make you more comfortable, right? My only other problem though on Wednesday is like that moon will square Saturn, right? And it'll be like, hey, like this isn't working. Moon will trine Venus where you can implement a new plan, a new set of rules, a new structure to work by. But simultaneously, Mars actually goes opposite Uranus first thing in the morning, which is interesting because I'm starting to get into like, it's interesting that Mars will go opposite Uranus and then the moon will conjoin Uranus, right? So the thing is, Mars is in Scorpio going opposite Uranus. Like it's what I've learned with the Scorpio Taurus stuff is it's really it can be dramatic for some people depending on your level of comfort. And for other people, it's just not. Like, for example, Mars in Scorpio is very, hey, like, you know, I talked about this last week, like Mars in Scorpio is going to do it no matter what. Like there's no, oh, like let me not do this. Let me think about it. It's not Mars in Libra is very iffy. Mars in Scorpio is like, hey, I'm going to shoot first, ask questions later type thing. And I think as Mars is in Scorpio going opposite Uranus, that tendency to, again, shoot first, ask questions later might uproot something. Uranus and Taurus is bringing destabilizing energy. Uranus is, liberation. Uranus is freedom, but Uranus is very destabilizing. Uranus is very random and unexpected, but it's in this Taurus sense where it's like, where you want to be grounded, where you want to be fixated. I think Mars going opposite Uranus is again triggering that Uranus, like things are going to flop real quick, but it's from Mars, right? It's definitely like a fight or a conflict or an engagement of some sort, competitiveness. And I think as we kind of wake up on Wednesday with Mars going opposite Uranus, some may describe this as unhinged energy, letting loose almost a little bit, not being really afraid to kind of shake things up a little bit. Well, it's one of those things too. Well, like kind of going back to that analogy of like standing as a grocery clerk, it's like, well, if it's bullshit, like, you might have to rattle the tape, like, shake things up and say, hey, that's kind of dumb. And we should bring this up, even though no one wants to really bring it up. I think as Mars goes opposite Uranus, kind of expect the unexpected, expect it. And if that does really occur in your life, kind of expect it to be a little bit more problematic. Not to say that you can't handle it, but the other thing with Uranus, though, is that it does rule inventiveness, right? Like literally, I don't like to say the word creativity because Uranus is more of like, Uranus is inventive because of emergency situations. And I think there's a difference between being creative for the sake of being creative and being like, hey, we got to figure out a solution because it requires our full and immediate attention right now. And so I think as Mars goes opposite Uranus, that like indicates like almost like an emergency, like, hey, this is brought up. What are you going to do? How are you going to handle it? And that moon's going to, square Saturn where it's like, hey, we can't just do things the way that we want to because that's the way we want to do things. We have to find what works better, right? And I think that moon trining Venus, squaring Saturn, I think the big question on Wednesday is, hey, what's going to work? How can we make this easier? How can we make this more enjoyable? So then the moon, well, also too, this is what's interesting. So at the same time, the moon is going to conjoin Uranus while it goes opposite Mars. So this is why I'm so fascinated by Wednesday. And I kind of just briefly went over Tuesday or Monday and Tuesday because, yeah, like when we get to the nighttime on Wednesday, that moon conjoins Uranus as it goes opposite Mars. So this is a super big, like, notice that it's after it trines Venus. This is also when Venus enters shadow, by the way, and we haven't even talked about that. But as that moon, applies to Uranus, where there's this sense of like, maybe even being inventive, maybe even like, I talked about this. I made a Uranus and Taurus video like years ago. It's probably super shitty. I haven't even thought about it honestly in a while, but I did talk about something like one of the analogies I used in that video was, like Uranus and Taurus being like jumping from iceberg to iceberg, where like let's say you're, for the sake of an argument, let's just say we're the classic stereotype of the polar bear on the ice cap that's like melting. And or let's not even say polar bear, let's just say you're a human because we don't got claws. And you got to get from one, like your little ice thing is melting and you want to jump to the next iceberg or whatever, or ice sheet. When you jump, it's a slippery area to jump from. And when you land, it's not like there's this sticky ground. It's also slippery too. It's also fragile. So it's like really risky it's kind of like, well, again, too, if the ground that you're on is literally melting and you need to get to a newer ground, it takes risks to get uncomfortable, right? It takes risks to move all that stuff. And I think the moon conjoining Uranus, this could be risk involved. This could be, again, taking a bet or taking a gamble. Whether you get lucky, I mean, it's trining Venus. There's definitely a potential for that. But I just look at Mars Uranus as definitely like, you might have to take a risk on Wednesday and do something you've never done before. And kind of, because it's going to get kind of brought up almost in an emergency situation. And this is also right when Venus enters shadow, right? So here's the thing. We're going to look back at, and this is what's so funny about Wednesday is Venus enters shadow as there's kind of like this, almost like this emergency popping up, right? Like, in the sense, this is of course not even a realistic analogy. Most of my analogies may not even be realistic. I'm thinking of like, okay, so the cashier thing at the grocery store clerk. This would be like someone's back gets injured and you go, okay, now I have to replace this person, to do that job, but they're injured. Why did they get injured? It's like, well, but they've been standing all day. And it's much harder to stand all day in one spot than it is to, run all day. And you kind of have to be, again, like, it's like, all right, I got to address this part. Are you going to, do the same thing over again and not kind of like actually address like the root issue? Or are you just going to kind of, glance it over and kind of just keep moving on? I think as Venus enters shadow on Wednesday, there is this sense of, hey, you might be applying a new system or a new set of rules to play by. And we're going to come back to this. This emergency kind of handling of things. Well, here's an example. What I've learned in working is a lot of the times it's not really about like, meritocracy isn't necessarily true. It's really always really about like who you know. And also how much you annoy people. But I just remember one time I ever got a promotion in my life. That was like actually like a promotion was when I was working at like the Hard Rock here on the Strip, and I was working in the retail, and I absolutely hated it. And I found out that we had a venue on the third floor, and we used to do raves, and I was like, man, I want to work up there. I fuck working retail. And I literally annoyed they hated me. I literally bugged them every day. I was like, when are you going to give me, like, when can I work up there? When can I work up there? And it wasn't until I think someone didn't show up for a really big event that they had that they were like, hey, it's like, get the fuck up here. Thanks. Like, we need your help now. If you're down to do it. And that's how I got this promotion. It was like super cool for me at the time. But it's typically these emergency situations that offer opportunities to implement something new that might be a little bit risky. But people seem to be like adverse to risk when an emergency situation kind of comes up, right? So this is one of those things. Like it may not even be like an emergency, but it's going to be like, if you've been trying to think of it in this way of like, I was like annoying these motherfuckers. Sorry for my language, but I was literally annoying my bosses so much. And then it finally came up. And the one time it was super random. And I was like, just so happened to be working that day. And they were like, do you want to work up here? And I was like, yes, get me up there. And then they, of course, I ended up like running. It was like me and some other girl pretty much ran that whole venue. So that turned out to be a good decision for them. But it's just one of those things where, when you go on Wednesday and Venus is about to enter shadow, right? And we're going to have a whole Venus retrograde. And as you probably should know, because my Venus retrograde video is out now, we're having a whole shift in the way that we apply the rules, right? The way that we kind of do things. So this is going to be one of those things that it's like something that comes up really randomly that gives you the ability to go, oh, let me try this right now. But the sequence of events is very, very random. And I think, if you're looking for the stability, it's not there. But if you are looking to try something new because, well, not necessarily that you've got nothing to lose, but why the hell not? I think this is a great day to do it because, again, it's super funny how we all hate, something like, I talk about Mercury retrograde videos, and pretty much what every astrologer talks about in Mercury retrograde videos is like, don't sign, any paperwork during a Mercury retrograde. It's like, making permanent decisions during a Mercury retrograde, maybe not like the best decision, but like what is a good thing I always like to recommend with Mercury retrogrades is like do something different. Like I plan on using this next Mercury retrograde in Aquarius is like the whole time, like it'll be building up in shadow. I'm going to be doing a lot of writing. And then like when Mercury goes retrograde, I'm going to do all of the editing, right? This is, so when Venus goes into shadow, right? This is kind of like, hey, try something new. You're going to change things about this. Well, like, I mean, again, let's go over the Venus retrogrades. Venus retrograded in Gemini, May of 2020. For me, Venus rules my 6th house of health, and my Venus is in Gemini. That's when I quit smoking cigarettes. I changed my health habits. Think of the Venus retrograde before that. That would have been in Scorpio and in Sagittarius, Scorpio and Libra. So think of October through December of 2018. What was going on then for you? What were you doing new? What were you doing different? Venus is also, again, your values. What were you valuing? What values changed for you? And, again, the whole reason I'm bringing that up is by this point, we're going to have that value shift. So this is, again, I can't emphasize enough. I think Wednesday is really just a day to kind of like, I think shit's going to kind of pop off. And I think it's time to try something new. I know some of you are probably like cringing hearing the word new and change. Heaven forbid you change. The Scorpios and Tauruses out there and Aquariuses. Good Lord. Anyway, so Wednesday, it's not really like the worst day for Mars. It's going to be unstable to say the least, but try something new. Do something that's like, again, Venus is in Capricorn. Like, see, this is what I love about Venus in Capricorn too. And Steve Jobs is really good about this of like aesthetics have rules. Things that look good and things that work have rules. This is why I love like feng shui. There is a certain way something can be set up to where it is going to function better, it is going to feel better, it's going to look better, and with all of that said, it will probably create better results, right? And I think that's this Venus in Capricorn thing. Like, hey, work doesn't have to be sufferable. Work doesn't have to be inefficient, right? Like Saturn Aquarius is like, hey, it has to be this way. But Venus in Capricorn is like, hey, no, we can have a fun rule set that works for everybody. I know that's kind of surprising to say, but it's just one of those things of like, don't be afraid to kind of like implement something new. Anyway, I'm kind of looking forward to Wednesday. Because I mean, Venus also enters shadow. And again, Venus is going to come back over the spot a few different times. We're going to have, Venus will come back in station direct January 30th. So these next 2 months, also pay attention to the economy and the stock market. I'm telling you, I'm going to make a video about this. I'm going to make a video about my Venus retrograde predictions. But one of them, is it really that big of a prediction saying that inflation is going to go crazy? Fed's going to raise interest rates in January and then there'll be deflation and then the housing market will probably crash. But then, how long are they going to be able to raise interest rates for? They'll probably lower interest rates again later on in 2022. But that's all happening this winter. And I think something here might kind of go down. Maybe that kind of starts the whole shebang of it. There's more. I have tons of Venus retrograde predictions. But again, I got to make a video about that. Anyway, I got to keep moving forward. Let's talk about Thursday. Thursday is interesting because on Thursday, we're going to have Mercury trine Neptune, Venus trine Uranus. Okay. Moon square Jupiter, and then the total lunar eclipse in Taurus. So the total lunar eclipse in Taurus is going to be absolutely insane. So here we have Mercury in Scorpio, trining Neptune in Pisces. This is a classic. You guys know what I'm about to say. Try not to make a story up in your head. Like Mercury in Scorpio is like, my sister has a Mercury in Scorpio, and she just like will something will happen, and like she'll just hyper focus on like this one thing, and like I didn't like something like I won't even see, or like maybe I'll pay attention to, but I was like, oh yeah, whatever. It's like this Mercury in Scorpio knows how to really focus on one thing, right? Which is really good in a lot of situations, but with trining Neptune, I just think for one, it can look really, really good romanticizing situation, and like it's Scorpio season, like. It's deep right now. Shit's really real. It's really emotional. I think maybe Mercury and Scorpio trining Neptune and Pisces is kind of like maybe romanticizing that depth, romanticizing and really kind of enjoying the Scorpio stuff, like the real raw emotion. But also Mercury and Scorpio can really like laser eye focus on the problem. And as it trines Neptune, it could really, again, you just be careful like what you're seeing and what stories you're making up about what you're seeing. On Thursday, Venus will also trine Uranus. I mean, like, with the last time Venus trine Uranus, I was much more comfortable like making like types of predictions. But now that Venus is going to go shadow and she'll trine Uranus, I have no idea. Like this may be something. I have no idea what this would be. Maybe in your own personal life. Again, maybe that, hey, being inventive, going back to the grocery store clerk thing, being like, hey, let me just try sitting in a chair, like doing something very inventive might actually work. Something that's Venus, right? Like it's okay to be, you can also work and be comfortable at the same time. Maybe, again, doing something very random like that, sporadic, will work. I like the Venus trine Uranus. The moon's going to be squaring Jupiter all day, where like the moon in Taurus squaring Jupiter all day is like, so for example, like let's go back to that grocery store clerk analogy. Let's say this grocery store guy who owns this place got all of his employees sitting in chairs. And let's say their morale boosted, their customers were more happy. And let's just say it did all these good things, but he didn't like it. Like moon and Taurus squaring Jupiter in Aquarius is like not liking the results, but like probably like, well, again, Jupiter's about hope and faith. And in Aquarius, it's kind of like Jupiter wants to be much more ideological, while Saturn is much more rational and realistic. So Jupiter in Aquarius is like, hey, like, it's trying to find hope in the more serious, more rational sides of things. And I think it's the moon's in Taurus squaring Jupiter. Moon in Taurus is like, hey, this is what's more comfortable. This is what is more nourishing. This is what's more, even in my opinion, more stable. And as it squares Jupiter, that just can probably go against maybe certain people's beliefs or a certain way that you might see things. So again, I think the big thing on Thursday is being maybe open-minded to the solution, because that also brings us to the total lunar eclipse in Taurus. So I talk about this in my year ahead horoscopes, where I'm going to make a video about the eclipses being in Taurus and Scorpio, because I think this will be big. But here's the deal though. This is going to be bringing up everything that is going to be going on for the next 2 years. This is the first eclipse that does not involve Sagittarius and Gemini stuff since 2020 or since 2019. But this is going to, shake the ground up. I think as this is at the end degrees of Scorpio and at Taurus, I think that it's good. This is a very clutching your pearls type eclipse, but I also believe, since this is a total lunar eclipse in Taurus, where you're looking for that stability, where you're looking for that sense of like nourishment and reward, it's not there. This is pretty much also on like Algol too. It's very revengeful. It's very spiteful. And I think this total lunar eclipse, I mean, like Venus enters shadow, Mars is opposite Uranus. It's going to be like very, very risky. I think it's going to be more interesting once we actually get to like the nodes being in Scorpio. But I think this will kind of be like, if you live, well, depending on where you live in what part of the world, but like this is, if you live in the country at all, when you go outside and it becomes really windy and you know that a storm is coming, you don't see the clouds, but the wind picks up and you go, yeah, it's about to storm. That's what this eclipse is. It's just, it's really, I don't know. I have so much to say about this, but I don't have the time to, and I'm going to make a video about it where I'll say all of it. I just want to say it now. But anyway, this total lunar eclipse in Taurus and Scorpio, where things should be, well, also too, look at where Scorpio and Taurus is at in your chart. This axis of your chart is going to get lit up for the first time in a long time. This is where the eclipses are going to be. You're going to have random activations here and there and here and there, and it's going to be very sporadic. It's going to be very sudden. It's going to be very unexpected, right? All this is involving Uranus too. So just kind of, in my opinion, just see what ends up happening on Thursday. Because again, like I said in the beginning of this video, a lot of this week is just planting seeds. Because everything, we're going to be dealing with this all of December. We're going to be dealing with the same shit in January, with the same shit in February. And we really don't even get done with all this stuff till March. So everything that's going on right now, you're not even going to get wrapped up till March. So to analogize, we just started the movie. And it's just starting to get good. We're 15 minutes into the movie and things are just now starting to really come alive, and we're starting to figure out what this movie's about. And that movie doesn't end till March. So let's go back to this thing. So this total lunar eclipse in Taurus, like, I think, again, the big thing is don't freak out. Don't feel so unstable. I think the big thing is just kind of like be open to what can present itself. but it's an eclipse. It's going to be pretty sudden. It's going to be pretty dramatic. That's what eclipses do. Friday, Moon will go into Gemini and conjoin the North Node and trine Saturn. That's about it. Liking that. Not a big deal at all. Post eclipse come down is not come down because the Moon will go into Gemini and conjoin the North Node where there's this, the North Node just, it's like giving, people, well, like, I want to say, like, this is like giving caffeine and sugar to people like me who can just go blah, 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 and like talk forever. Moon conjoining the North Node in Gemini after all this is kind of like, it's like, well, here's a good analogy. If we were watching a movie, that Taurus eclipse is kind of like, whoa, an ending we didn't expect. And then that Moon goes into Gemini and conjoins the North Node. And it's like when everyone gets out of a theater or like when your favorite TV show ends and everyone's talking about it. It's like, oh, that was a crazy ending. I didn't like that ending. I didn't know that this ending was going to occur. That's what like Friday is like. It's very jibber jabber about everything that's going on. And the Moon going into Gemini, trining Saturn, I think the big thing like on a personal level is like, let's understand that situation a little bit. That Moon in Gemini, let's process our emotions. Let's talk about it. It's going to be trining Saturn. What does this mean? What are we going to do with it? How do we make this more of a, I think that total lunar eclipse will kind of be kind of like a shakeup. And then as we go into this area, it's kind of like, talking about the, what's the word I'm looking for here? Solutions, talking about how to control situations, how to, understanding the situation a little bit better on Friday. Yeah, Friday just kind of seems like trying to mentally grasp everything that was going on Thursday and like really trying to make it click. And then we get into Saturday, Mercury squares Jupiter while the Moon squares Neptune. Kind of weird. Like, it's kind of a weird week, honestly. Mercury squaring Jupiter is like, I think Mercury in Scorpio is very cynical. I think Mercury in Scorpio is like going to say what it's going to say. I think it's going to bring up stuff that, maybe people don't want to talk about. Mercury in Scorpio is going to square Jupiter in Aquarius. That might pop people's bubble a little bit. There's so many things. There's so many ways that could look in society right now. But, Mercury in Scorpio is not afraid to, talk about, like Mercury in Scorpio is like almost like a child in a sense. Where I remember this one time, I felt so bad about this. It was like the first time I think I ever felt shame as a kid, or like guilt. My uncle was really, really obese. And I remember being, I had been like 4 or 5 and I went up to him. I was like, why are you so fat? And god damn, everyone in that room was just like, oh, Cameron. And, it's just one of those things where like Mercury and Scorpio is very like, what's like pointing out and looking at it and like bringing it up. And Mercury squaring Jupiter and Aquarius is like, well, this is kind of like one of those things where, I don't think this is a great day for like constructive arguments, but I would say with Mercury and Scorpio squaring Jupiter and Aquarius is there's going to be Jupiter. Again, I love this from Rhetorius, and I'm so glad I found this. Rhetorius is like shows us like essentially the first time that we understand why, or Rhetorius, the Egyptian, tells us that Mercury and Jupiter find each other a detriment in each other's sign because Mercury is rational and Jupiter is like pretty much idealizes and Jupiter rules abundance and Mercury rules rationality, and rationality is opposed to abundance and abundance is opposed to rationality. And so when you have like Mercury and Scorpio squaring Jupiter is very idealistic. Jupiter has a bubble, and I feel like Mercury and Scorpio is not afraid to pop that bubble, not afraid to pop that idealistic, and that's Jupiter and Aquarius. It's like, hey, this is fine. This works. It's like, no, Jupiter's going to go into Pisces. So things will be much more idealized and they will work better. But I think with Jupiter and Aquarius, like with Saturn there, it's like trying to make the best out of prison. You're like, this is fine. Like, I like being in prison. And Mercury and Scorpio is just gonna be like, no, you don't. I think Mercury and Scorpio is really kind of being very clear about maybe something that you're feeling too, because Mercury's working its way up towards a Cazimi once we get it to these solar eclipses that we got going on next week, which we'll talk about. But anyway, as we keep going, Sunday, there we go. Sunday, the moon is pretty much just going to keep transiting Gemini. It'll make a trine to Jupiter and then enter Cancer. And not a big thing, not a big deal. Thing is, the moon's trining Jupiter. trying to see the bigger picture. God, that was a funny voice crack. Trying to see the moon's going to trine Jupiter. And there's this kind of like, trying to see the bigger picture, trying to be hopeful. Moon in Gemini is, well, again, Mercury squaring Jupiter is really going to pop that bubble, and the moon in Gemini is going to be like, duh, well, actually, and, going to try to intellectualize it. Might struggle a little bit, but then the moon will go into Cancer later on Sunday night, where that's going to be much more like touchy-feely. And what I love about the moon going into Cancer is Mars, Mercury, the sun will actually be in Sagittarius by that point. Boo. I was kind of hoping for another moon in Cancer, sun in Scorpio transit. Anyway, I think as the moon goes into Cancer on Sunday night, it's going to be kind of like, all right, let's center in our emotions. Let's check in. How do we feel? What needs to be felt? Where do my emotions need to be taken care of? Because I think also too, it's like, well, what's interesting is we have that eclipse on Thursday, right? Things get really, really shooken up. And then Friday is kind of like trying to handle the situation. But then Saturday is kind of like, Mercury squares Jupiter. And it's just kind of like, yeah, we kind of still have to talk about that. And then I think Sunday is like, all right, well, this is a little bit intense. So let's kind of like, make sure that we're all feeling good. It's kind of like, for me, for example, maybe this isn't the best habit I get into, but sometimes like if I'm very like emotional and if I have like big decisions to make, like I try to make sure like I eat something before I do something, because like it's just really easy for like I can get like really hangry if I'm like really hungry and I'm upset. I'm not grounded, right? So that's something that I think maybe Sunday is going to be like, hey, let's actually make sure that we're checked in a little bit and not just kind of all over the place. But kind of leads us to next week. And next week, so what's interesting about next week is next week kind of brings up stuff about like December of 2020 and even May of 2020, but also May of 2021. The sun goes into Sagittarius and it's going to conjoin the South Node. That sounds like a purge. Mercury is going to go into Sagittarius and also conjoin the South Node. The Mercury Cazimi doesn't happen until the week after this next week. So in about 2 weeks, it'll happen on Monday, the following week after this. I don't even know what week I'm talking about now, but that's when that happens. I just think a lot of next week is kind of like Sag season. It's going to be kind of about like seeing the bigger picture. It's going to be on the South Node. There's going to be kind of, I've talked about this. South Node and Sagittarius, we're changing our beliefs, we're changing our worldview, we're changing our perceptions. And this is going to be a time where we kind of start. This is the final round of that. This is the final purging and getting rid of beliefs and getting rid of things that, changing our worldview, while the North Node's in Gemini and we're kind of focused on, what we're learning and what we're understanding. So, that's what's going on this week. That's this week's astrology for you. I know it's a weird week. It's a weird week. I think it's like nothing happens on Monday and Tuesday. Wednesday, Thursday's weird. Venus enters shadow, Mars opposite Uranus, total lunar eclipse. It's like, it's super out of the blue. It's not necessarily like, really pre-planned or kind of like, seen in advance. But what's interesting too is after Venus enters shadow and this eclipse, the nodes go into Scorpio and Taurus by by January. So this eclipse is going to set up everything that's going to be going on in 2022. The eclipse is the 2022 plus Venus enters shadow. So it's going to be what we're dealing with for the next couple months. So it's like, the rest of the next 4 or 5 months really start this week. So anyway, I got to get going. With that being said, thank you guys so much for being here, liking, sharing, commenting, subscribing. I love and appreciate every single one of you, and I'll be seeing you next week.